Okay, so have you ever like gotten to the end of the day and felt like your brain was just fried? Like you couldn't even choose what to eat for dinner because you just made so many decisions all day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we've all been there. You're talking about decision fatigue. It's a real thing, and we're going to deep dive into it today. We've got a whole bunch of research on this, and we're going to figure out what it is and why it matters.
Decision fatigue. Yeah, and it's not just, like, oh, I feel tired after making decisions. There's actual science behind this, right?
Absolutely.
It affects even professionals like judges.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there was one study that found that judges were much more likely to grant parole early in the day.
Really?
But as the day went on, that likelihood just went way down. So it's like
Yeah.
their ability to make a fair and objective decision was getting worse with each ruling.
Wow. That's kind of scary. So, is our brain like a phone battery that slowly drains throughout the day? Is every decision we make just using up a little bit of that energy?
That's a great analogy. It really is. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that's responsible for planning and decision making, that part of the brain uses a lot of energy. Every time we make a choice, we're basically using up glucose, which is the fuel that our brain uses.
Hmm.
So as that fuel gets depleted, we just don't think as clearly, and we can't make decisions as well.
So that's the science of it. But why should we care? I mean, is decision fatigue really that big of a deal?
It is a big deal. We make so many choices every day. Like, just think about it. From what to wear to what to eat, what to buy, even like what route to take to work.
Yeah.
Then you've got the bigger decisions like finances in your career.
Yeah.
And when our brains get overloaded with all these choices, we're more likely to make impulse purchases or to procrastinate or even to burn out.
You're right. I've definitely been there where I'm like, instead of cooking dinner because I have to make too many choices about what to cook, I'll just order takeout, even though it's probably not as healthy.
Yeah. And it's not just about feeling tired. There's research that shows that people who have to make a lot of decisions are actually more likely to avoid making decisions altogether.
Wow.
Like they'll stick with the default option, even if it's not the best option for them, just because they just don't have the energy to think about all the alternatives.
Oh. So what causes decision fatigue? Is it just the number of decisions we have to make, or are there other things going on too?
Well, the number of choices definitely plays a role, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah.
Things like multitasking or information overload, even those little tiny decisions we make all day long can add up.
Little tiny decisions, like what do you mean?
Like, should I use a blue pen or a black pen?
Right.
It seems insignificant, but you add that on top of everything else, it really wears you down, especially when you're like switching between tasks and trying to process all this information online and just like trying to figure out every little detail. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So, I've heard about Steve Jobs wearing the same outfit every day to like simplify his life. Was that him fighting decision fatigue?
You know what? I think that's exactly what he was doing.
Hmm.
He was intentionally reducing how much he had to think about.
Hmm.
So by eliminating those minor decisions, he could save his mental energy for the bigger things, like, all that creative strategic thinking that he was famous for.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So it's not just the number of decisions, it's also how complex those decisions are.
It is. And this also has to do with the neurotransmitters in our brains. So when we're making decisions, our brains rely on neurotransmitters like dopamine. Dopamine's involved in motivation and feeling good and all that. So as we deplete those neurotransmitters, we start to feel tired and we lose focus and our willpower goes down.
So it's not that we're just weak-willed, it's that our brain chemistry is actually changing as we get decision fatigued.
Right. And that's why trying to just like power through decision fatigue doesn't always work. We have to understand how our brains work and then develop some strategies to, replenish those depleted resources.
So if our brain is like a battery slowly draining throughout the day, how do we recharge it so we can make better decisions?
That's a great question. And the good news is that there are a lot of things we can do to combat decision fatigue. And we'll talk about those in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so our brains are like batteries that drain throughout the day from making decisions. That's a pretty powerful image. But like, what can we actually do about it? Like, how do we recharge and make smarter choices?
Yeah. So the good news is there are a lot of strategies we can use. It's not about like getting rid of all decisions altogether.
Right.
It's about just getting better at managing them.
So it's not about becoming a robot and making every day exactly the same.
No.
It's just being strategic.
Yeah. Like one of the best things you can do is to just build some routines into your life.
Yeah.
If you think about it, if you have the same thing for breakfast every morning, you're not using up mental energy trying to decide what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
You just do it.
Hmm.
and you free up your brain to think about other stuff.
Right. So what are some other areas where we can like build routines?
Gosh, there are so many.
Yeah.
You could have a workout routine that's already planned out, or
Mm.
like a capsule wardrobe where everything mixes and matches,
Uh,
or even just like setting aside a specific time every day to check your email.
okay.
The key is to figure out which decisions are the ones that really drain you, and then just come up with the systems so you don't have to think about it so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like setting your life on autopilot so you can just cruise through those everyday things.
Right.
So if you're not spending all your energy on the little decisions, you have more left over for the big ones, right?
Exactly. And
Oh,
that actually brings us to another really important strategy, which is prioritization. Not all decisions are created equal.
right. Some are obviously a lot more important than others.
Right. So this is where a tool like the Eisenhower matrix can be really helpful.
The Eisenhower
Yes.
matrix.
Have you heard of that?
Maybe. Remind me.
Okay, so it's basically a way of like categorizing your tasks by how urgent they are and how important they are.
Okay.
So the idea is that you want to focus on the tasks that are both urgent and important first, and then maybe delegate or postpone the things that are less crucial. And anything that's not urgent or important, you just get rid of it.
So basically, it's like learning to say no to the things that don't really matter and saving your energy for the decisions that really do.
Exactly. Imagine if you had like a CEO
Yeah.
who spent their entire morning dealing with ordering office supplies instead of like, planning a big merger. So if they use the Eisenhower matrix, they can delegate those little tasks to someone else and then, use their own brain power to make those big decisions that are going to really affect the future of the company.
That's a great example. It's about being intentional with where you're putting your energy.
Hmm.
So we've talked about routines and prioritization. What else can we do?
Another good strategy is to use automation in default settings. Like set up auto pay for your bills or get your groceries delivered on a regular schedule, or even just like choose a default investment portfolio.
It's like taking the decision out of it altogether.
Yeah. It reminds me how Steve Jobs apparently hired an interior designer to just like fully furnish his house
Yeah.
so that he wouldn't have to make all those decisions about furniture and stuff.
Wow. It seems extreme, but I get it.
It is, but it just shows you the power of like really simplifying things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that drastic. Even just using a template for your emails so you don't have to write the same thing over and over can really save you some mental energy.
So we're not just making smarter choices. We're actually like reducing the number of choices we have to make in the first place.
Yeah, and that leads into another interesting thing, which is that everybody has their own decision-making style.
Decision-making style.
Yeah. Like some people are just natural minimalists and they need to keep things really simple and stick to routines. And then you have your prioritizers who are really good at like, you know, figuring out what's most important and focusing all their energy on that. And then there are people who are really into automating everything and delegating as much as possible.
Yeah, I can definitely see how those are different styles.
Yeah, so the key is to figure out like what your own style is. Do you get overwhelmed when you have too many options? Do you have a hard time prioritizing things? Or are you always looking for ways to like streamline and delegate? Once you know your style, you can just like tweak these strategies to make them work for you.
That's really helpful. It's like giving yourself permission to make decisions in a way that feels good for you instead of just like draining. But what about those times when you absolutely have to make a big decision and you're already feeling wiped out?
Timing is everything. Try to schedule your big decision-making sessions for when you have the most energy. Like for a lot of people, that's in the morning, but it might be different for you. So, just pay attention to your own energy levels and try to make those big decisions when you're feeling sharp.
It's like Tim Ferriss, who blocks out 2 hours every morning for making those critical decisions, and then he just lets the rest of his day, kind of flow from there.
Exactly.
Okay, so we schedule those decision-making windows, and then just as important, what do we do in between?
Breaks. You have to take breaks.
Yeah.
Remember, your brain needs that glucose to function properly.
So we're talking about sleep and taking walks and staying hydrated and all that good stuff.
Yes, even just a 10-minute walk can make a huge difference in how clearly you think and how well you make decisions. There's actually research that shows that judges who take breaks and have snacks make more consistent reelings throughout the day.
Wow.
So you're basically nourishing your brain.
Literally and figuratively. Okay, so that all makes sense, but what about those times when you're just like completely overwhelmed by the number of options? Like when you're standing in the grocery store trying to choose a cereal and there are like a million different boxes?
Oh, yeah. And in those situations, one thing that really helps is to just limit your choices. Have you ever heard of the rule of three?
The rule of three. No.
Okay, So it's basically, instead of trying to choose from like a zillion different things, you just narrow it down to three. So let's say you're trying to decide what to watch on Netflix. Instead of endlessly scrolling, you could pick three genres that you're interested in and then just choose a show from one of those categories.
So it's like creating manageable decision points instead of just getting lost in all the
Yeah,
possibilities.
exactly.
Okay, so this is all starting to make sense. But do you have any real world examples of how this actually works? Like, are there any companies or people who are like really good at this?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like one of my favorites is the Amazon one-click button.
Oh, yeah, that is brilliant. It's so simple, but it takes all those extra steps and decisions out of checking out.
Exactly. They made the process super streamlined so you don't have to think about it so much, and it probably increased their sales too.
Right. So Amazon's got it figured out. What about us regular people?
Well, there's this mom who calls it her power hour. She takes an hours a night before
Yeah.
and just gets everything ready for the next day.
Oh,
Like she packs lunches and picks out outfits and gets breakfast ready so that in the morning it's just like go, go, go.
that's so smart. It's like pre-gaming for decision making.
Totally. And then there's Warren Buffett, who's, one of the most successful investors of all time. He has this two-list strategy. So he writes down his top 25 goals, and then he circles the five most important ones, and then he basically ignores the other 20 until he's accomplished those top five.
He's like, don't even let those other things take up space in your brain.
Exactly. And it makes sense, right? The simpler we can make things and the better we get at prioritizing, the more energy we have for those really important decisions.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a lot less overwhelmed by all this. But before we move on, I'm curious about how these strategies can work in other areas of life. Like, what about teams or families or entrepreneurs? Any advice for them?
Yeah, for sure. Let's start with teams and workplaces. One thing that teams can do is to create like templated emails for frequently asked questions or routine requests.
Oh, that's a good idea. So you don't have to start from scratch every time.
Yeah, it's like having a pre-written response ready to go.
Mm.
It can save so much time and energy.
Yeah, and then everyone's on the same page.
Right. And another idea is to have something like no meeting Wednesdays.
I love that idea.
So you have like dedicated blocks of time where you can really focus on your work and you're not getting interrupted by meetings all the time.
It's like giving everyone a break from all those micro decisions that come with meetings.
Exactly. What about families? How can families handle all those daily decisions?
Yeah, families are tough.
Well, a weekly meal plan can really help. Like get everyone involved in choosing what they want to eat for the week so you don't have to have that like what's for dinner fight every night.
Yeah, and then you can just go to the grocery store and get everything you need and you don't have to think about it.
Exactly. And another thing that can help families is to like assign decision roles. So maybe one parent takes care of all the school stuff and the other parent handles the extracurricular activities. So it's like you're dividing up the mental load.
That makes a lot of sense. You're not putting all the pressure on one person. Okay, so what about entrepreneurs? They're always juggling so many things.
Yeah, entrepreneurs definitely need to set boundaries. Like block off some time where you're not making any decisions, maybe no client calls after a certain hour,
Yeah.
so they can recharge. And then when they do have to make those important decisions, they're coming at it with a fresh perspective.
Right. So it's all about being proactive instead of reactive. And a lot of these strategies are about that.
They are. And to wrap things up, here's a fun little challenge for all our listeners. Try the 5-4-3-2-1 rule for small, everyday decisions. Basically, you give yourself 5 seconds to make the choice. Salad or sandwich? 5-4-3-2-1, sandwich.
I love that. It's like decision-making boot camp.
Right.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on decision fatigue, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that every choice we make, even the little ones, takes mental energy. So by being more aware of the choices we're making and by building some routines and automating things and prioritizing what really matters, we can reduce our stress and we can avoid making those like impulsive mistakes and we can just free up our minds to focus on the things that really matter.
Yeah, it's about being intentional with how we make decisions. And it reminds me of a quote by Roy Baumeister. He said, "The best decision makers are the ones who know when not to decide."
That's so true. Sometimes the best decision is to just simplify or automate or delegate.
So for our listeners, we challenge you to take a look at one area of your life where you feel overwhelmed by decisions. Maybe it's meal planning or your morning routine or your email inbox. Just find one way to automate or create a routine or delegate some of those decisions.
Yeah, even a small change can make a big difference.
This has been such a great deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on decision making.
Me too. I hope our listeners do too.
Until next time, make those choices count.